In this video, we're going to take a look at SafeNotes 2, which is a web challenge I made for INTIGRITI's Leet Up Live CTF. If you didn't do this challenge this time, it might look familiar, and that's because I made this as a monthly challenge during DEF CON this year, and this is essentially a patched version of the challenge. So I'm not going to run through how the previous one was solved. There's already a write-up and a video out there for that. Let me just say that we were able to achieve cross-site scripting through a client-side path traversal and open redirect bug, which allowed us to steal the flag which is in the admin's cookie. So the idea is that the developer read through the bug reports that were submitted and they fixed the issues, and we want to see, have they indeed been fixed, or are there new issues we might be able to exploit? So I'm just going to go ahead and register a new account first of all, and that's it. We're logged in. We can create a note, and everything looks basically the same as the previous challenge, so we're going to want to go and have a look through the code and see what has actually changed. So it is an open source challenge, and we can just jump in and have a look at the source code, and there's actually some notes to say what the developer has fixed. So in this case, you can see that whenever the note ID is being fetched, they realize that they shouldn't be using includes to check whether there is a .. in there, and that we should URL decode the input before we do any validation. So in the previous challenge, we were able to essentially URL encode .. because the check for .. was being done before the URI was being decoded. So now it's being decoded first, and instead of using includes, they're using .replace, which is going to strip out any .. in the string before it's ultimately used in the API call. So that was one of the mitigations that they added in order to prevent the client-side path traversal, but they also fixed the regex with the note ID. So if you scroll down here, you will see that, yeah, here we go, the regex. So the only thing that changed here is we've added this symbol, the caret, I think it's called, to basically say that the note ID has to start with a UUID. Previously, it was just checking to make sure it ended with it, so it meant that we could do like .. But in this case, we're not going to be able to do any of that. In fact, let us go back to the view note page, and that's where we already were. Let me do that again. All right, so if I try and put in here .. and view note, it's not going to work. Even if I try and put in here A, it's not going to work because it has to be this format. And same for the end. If I put anything at the end, it's just not going to accept it. Another thing was the XSS vulnerability, which was in the data.debug section. So where was this removed? It was up here. So whenever we view the notes, if you remember last time, there was the note content, which we've still got. It's being sanitized with DOM Purify, which is good. But there was also a data.debug section here, which users shouldn't have been able to access because whenever they store notes, it only stores the content parameter. And whenever you load notes, it only loads the content parameter. But due to the open redirect, attackers were able to use their own server to essentially send whatever they wanted, which meant that they were able to populate this. And there was no DOM Purify because the developer wasn't expecting people to be able to insert data there to begin with. All right, so that's done. No longer vulnerable to cross-site scripting. And they also added a login function here. So you can see that they're just a little bit concerned that hackers are trying to break into the website and they want to log any access. So they've created this function, log note access. It takes the sanitized note ID and the content that's going to be written and, the content that's being viewed. And it's basically just going to log this. It's going to get the username and it's going to, again, just make sure there's nothing dangerous in there. And then it's going to make a post request to store this in a log just so that we can see who's accessing what notes at what times and do we need to investigate anything. There's also a debug section here to make sure that the log entry data looks okay, but at the moment this is commented out. So you can see there's a comment from the developer saying, remember to comment this out when not debugging because they don't need to see the output of the log. That's not something that standard users will need to see. Oh, just while we're here, let us go over to the views.py page and just show as well the API log. Here we go. So yeah, it's going to take the note ID, it's going to take the content, and then it's basically just going to log, okay, what was the note ID, what was the log ID, and the username and things like that. These are all added to the database. All right, one final fix. That was 5 fixes we've been through, or that's 4. This is the 5th. And it was the open redirect. So there was an open redirect on the contact endpoint, which meant that people could provide a URL, and there wasn't very good validation on it, so you could just put in an attacker server there. This time we've changed that, so it is either going to take a post request, there's no return URL here or anything, or it's just going to return just some standard static HTML or static text. If we do supply the contact form, it's going to take our name, it's going to take the message that we want to send, and then it's just going to respond with some feedback to say thanks for sending your message. Oh, one final change that I forgot about, because there is no data that's not going through DOM Purify now on the client side, the developer also removed bleach on the server side. I can't actually remember where it was now. It should be in the create note, but create, here we go. No, it wasn't in create. Where was it? Logout, call. Here we go. Store. It's in the API store call. So originally this was passed through bleach. So we had users enter in a note on the client side. It would be sanitized with DOM Purify. It would go through to the server and it'd be sanitized with bleach. And then it would go to the view note page where it would be again sanitized by DOM Purify. Since everything on the client side is now sanitized by DOM Purify, everything that users could potentially access, bleach has been removed from the server side. So I think we've reviewed all of the changes. Let us have a look and see how we're going to formulate our attack plan this time. Let me go back to view.html and let's have a look at the validation that they put in here. So we saw that they are decoding the note ID first, so we can't URL encode to bypass that. But there's actually an issue with how they're replacing the values here. Let me just add a comment, and let's say we have a ... here. We send that through as a note ID. It's going to see, okay, there is a dot, and then it's looking for either a backslash or a forward slash. That's going to be true, so it's just going to delete it. It's going to remove it from the string. But what if we were to put in ... // It's going to see this ... / right here, and it's going to say that's not allowed, strip it. And then what are we left with? We're left with exactly what we want. So yeah, this is an issue if you don't recursively check the input. So if we're going to strip ... // we need to do it recursively in case one of the ... slashes we remove ends up leaving a ... / in its place. So yeah, we can do ... // This is going to take us back 3 directories back to the root directory. We have some problems that we need to overcome. One of them is how we're going to get this in the first place. This isn't a valid UUID, and we know that the regex has now been corrected for the UUID, so we're not going to be able to enter those ... slashes to begin with. The second issue is the open redirect was patched on contact, so even if the UUID, even if we could just put in these ... slashes as the note ID, where are we going to return it to? We don't have that endpoint that we want to chain with the CSPT. And finally, even if neither of those things had changed, so even if we still had the open redirect on contact and we still had an issue with the regex of the note ID, there's a third issue, and that is that the data.debug section was removed from the viewing functionality. So remember down here, so even if we did manage to traverse back to contact and contact still had an open redirect to send us to our attacker server, there's nothing that we can send, because even if we send a debug parameter, it's not going to be rendered anywhere. The only thing that it's going to try to render is the data.content, and that's always going to go through sanitize no matter whether we control the attacker server or not. So it's time to look at some of the new functionality that the developer introduced to see whether they have accidentally included some vulnerabilities. Remember we had this one, log no access, so it's going to take in a username in case maybe we need to ban them. And it's reading the current username from getelement.id.username.innerText. So let me take a copy of this. Let's go back to the page. Do F12, we'll put that in, and look, the output is cat, and that's being read because we render the username on the page to say who is logged in. However, if that doesn't exist, then it's going to try to read the username from the get parameter in the address bar. The problem is that's always going to exist. I mean, we could go here and we could use F12 and go and remove it so it doesn't exist, but we need to think about the end game. How are we going to control that on the victim's browser? We're not going to be able to just go and delete an element and then insert the name parameter into the address bar. So we need to try and think about how this is going to work whenever we need to deliver the URL to the admin or to the bot. So anyway, regardless of where the username comes from, it will first be validated again, just to make sure there's no path traversal in there, but we already know that is a flawed validation system. And then it's going to pass the username to the API notes log path, and it's basically going to store that right as the log entry, which we saw on the other side. So it's sending over the username, the note ID, and the content, and then that'll all be logged. And then we have this response that's going to come back, which will render in the debug content, but that's only for development. So you can see here that actually there is nothing for that to render in, which is why we will get an error. I think we actually saw one whenever we went to, yeah, you can see here document.getElementById is null because it's trying to return the result of the log no access call, which let's have a look at that in the network tab. Where is it? It must be this one. No, that's a fetch. Oh, it's this one. Post to cat. Okay, so you've got this post request. It's going to API notes log cat, and you can see then response is the note ID, the log entry is created, so that's the success message. It's not being displayed anywhere because of that debug div element not being available on the page. Now, we already know that DOM Purify is going to prevent any XSS payloads, but let us see if we can put in some HTML here. So if I try and put this in italics and then try and put this in bold, go to create and view the note, and notice that it does actually render. So although we're not able to use dangerous JavaScript-based payloads in there, we are able to modify the HTML. And this is where DOM Clobbering comes in. So you might have seen this before in some challenges. It's come up quite a few times on Integrity. And DOM Clobbering is a technique that allows you to inject HTML into the page to modify the DOM and ultimately change the behavior of JavaScript, which is kind of what we want to do, right? We want the JavaScript to load the username from the address bar instead of from the HTML page. So let me go back to create a note. And in here, I'm going to say we want some kind of element on the page, and we want the ID of it to be username, and then I've got the value set to hacker, and I'll create that. Let's go and view the note. Notice that the note content is hacker, but it still says logged in as cat here. So let me open up F12, and let's do that again, the document.getElementById username, and notice this time it comes back with hacker. So presumably, if we go back to network and let us reload the page. Look at that. The post request is now going to API/note/log/hacker instead of the cat username that was intended, which means if we were to send something like this to the victim or to the bot, the log is going to go under a different username. So that's quite interesting in itself. You might be able to use that maliciously still by doing a fake attack and having it all being logged to a different username than your own. But it's not very useful in terms of getting us the flag. So let us now try and do the path traversal. We've got the username is currently set to hacker. So that means if I go here and do, all right, name equals, and then we need to do the 4 dots and 2 slashes. All right, we'll do that 3 times. We have a look at the, okay, did it even, oh, it didn't actually make the request at all that time. I didn't make the log request. I'm not actually too sure why that is, but I do know why it didn't work. I'm just not too sure off the top of my head why it didn't make the log request. But anyway, the name didn't allow us to traverse because we didn't set the username to null. So it's taking the username hacker. It's not taking the username null. So let's go back to create a note. And this time we'll do that same thing again. We'll just do P and the ID is equal to username, but this time we don't want to put anything in the center of that as the content. So we'll create that. We will view the note. All right, let's just check again. F12, reload. This time it's going to null. You see that? And because the username is null, it will now allow us to say user equals something here. I'm going to do the ... slashes that we want. Oh, we've got the invalid note ID. Oh, I know why it is. Because I'm using a question mark instead of an and in our query. That's not a very good idea. Okay, done. Let's try that. So maybe that's actually why it didn't send that post request the last time. It was just because I didn't have the address in the address bar properly. Okay, let's see. I need to paste this in again. Null, okay, it still went to API. Oh, I've got the get parameter wrong. Wow, okay. The get parameter is name, not user. So that would help if I read the code properly. But yeah, there we go. The post request is now going to the root directory. So let's have a look. Request, does it show here? Request. Yeah, .. And for that reason, it went back 3 directories to the home directory. We got method not allowed because we sent it a post request with all this data, and the home page doesn't take a post request. So now we need to go and find an endpoint that will take a post request, and hopefully that will use one of these elements, because we don't have control over what that API request sends. We don't have control over the method. We don't have control over the parameters. Well, we've got control over the values, but we can't add new parameters here. So maybe we go back to the code again, we'd have a look at our views and try and find out what endpoints do accept posts. We could try and then read through the code and see, are they going to be useful, or we could just try them and just see what happens. Actually, the contact endpoint was updated, and although it no longer has an open redirect, there is an issue with it. And if you notice here, it takes a post request, which is what we have, and it's going to take that as JSON as well. We have JSON data. It has a name and a content parameter, so it's the name and the message. And that's exactly what we're sending, name, content, and also a note ID, but it doesn't matter if we include extra parameters, they just won't be used. So if we were to forward this request to the contact endpoint, it's going to forward the name and the content we provide. It's going to send those as a post request, and then that's going to respond with a message saying, thanks for your message, username, we will be in touch. Who does the username come from? It comes from the post parameter. Who controls the post parameter? We do. We control this name. So what if we were to go ahead and change that from the ... slashes? Let me do here. What was it again? And then the name is equal to. So what if we were to put in here contacts? You can see that we have the post request. It goes to contact. It's sent along the name as contact. That's not particularly any use to us. Let me see. Nothing comes back as the note ID. All right, so it's come back with the contacts. Let me go to the console, actually. We have this error, document.getElementById is null. So whatever's being returned from this endpoint, which we know what's being returned, right? It's this message, is not being displayed on screen because it has nowhere to be displayed. In fact, let me go back though. Yeah, let's go to our network tab. Let's have a look at that request again. Yeah, we can see the response here. So if you look at the response is thank you for your message, and it has reflected the username back to us. But we want to reflect it on screen. So let's take care of that first, and then we'll try and work out where we can get our XSS from. Well, we know why it's not being displayed on screen. We've gone over that a couple of times. It's because it can't find this debug content section, or debug content it's looking for as a div ID. So the developer obviously just assumed if they commented this out, everything would be good, but we've already seen with the DOM Clobbering that we're able to inject a username element to the page, which affects how the JavaScript works. So what if we were to inject that div content? What do we need? We need debug content. So what if we were to inject that? Would that ensure that the response has somewhere to be rendered? Only one way to find out. Let's go back and create a note. Let us put in here. So we've still got a username. We need that, and we need it to be null. But we're also just going to add in a div with the relevant debug content. We'll go to create. We'll go to view our note. And notice this time we've actually got a debug. So we were getting an error before in the console because it was trying to get element by ID and it was wanting to assign the log output there, but it couldn't because the developer disabled it. Now it can. This is a good sign. And now then, if we go, let us do name is equal to ... // Let's take this again. Let's do to contact. All right, we run that, and this time our output is reflected on the screen. And remember, if we inspect this, remember that this is not going to be sanitized with DOM Purify. So any XSS that's in here should trigger. Of course, we need that to come through the name parameter in the address bar because we can't put it in the note because the note itself will go through DOM Purify. So you can't just clobber the name element to have that XSS payload, if that makes sense. We want to go back to contact. We can't change this route. So we'll also need to put in like a question mark or a hash symbol or something here. So that would be like a query parameter. So here maybe we would say, okay, XSS is equal to, and then we do our image source equals X, on error equals alert 1, and then we close that off. Do you think this is going to work? Oh, it did work. Oh, I didn't actually think it was going to work. Okay. I thought we needed to URL encode the question mark because it's not the first query, but I guess we don't. All right, well, yeah, whenever I was testing it, I was URL encoding that. Apparently, it's not needed. I also thought originally that we couldn't put spaces in the payload here because whenever I was testing it, I originally had backslash here. Let me take a copy. And okay, if we go to, just notice I didn't get the alert, right? We go to the console and then we get this unexpected error. And I thought it was because there was spaces in here. So I kind of worked out, okay, we can actually do it without spaces and do it like this. But this doesn't work either, I don't think. Let me try it. No, that doesn't work either. In the end, it just turned out it was just this backslash at the end that was causing the problems. So yeah, it doesn't really matter either way. But there we go. We've got our XSS now. All we need to do is exfiltrate the cookie. I don't have one set up at the moment on my browser, so let's do document.cookie. Oh, there we go. It knows what it wants to do. Yeah. Oh, it is already set up. Okay, I did it earlier. No problem. And that's not how we clear. I'm so used to doing things in the terminal. I don't know why I'm clearing it anyway. There's nothing there. Okay, let us wrap this up. Let me go and create a web server. I'm going to do python-m http.server. I'll do it on port 1337. And then I'm going to open up an ngrok connection. I'll do ngrok http 1337. That's going to expose whatever is in this directory to the internet on the address that it gives us. And for some reason, I can never resize that. So I have to minimize, I have to make it really small in order to copy that address. All right, let's do it. Let's go and update our payload. Control and Z. Okay, on error, we want to say that, let's just do a fetch. And then we'll put this in here. Oh, it didn't copy it. We'll do a fetch. We'll put this in here. And then we want that to include the flag. So let me just do a question mark here. And we want to do a plus, but we also need to make sure this is URL encoded. Do I have URL? I think I have an alias set up for this. I can never remember. URL encode plus is %2b. Okay. So %2b. And then document.cookie. Let's try that. Let's have a look at our logs. Yep, we've got the log, and you can see it there. CryptoCat is the best, so it returned the cookie. So that's it. All we need to do is go and send this exact same URL to the admin. And, oh, we need to make sure it's the correct URL. Oh, we get an invalid note format. Where is the note? Maybe I need to put this first. Okay, I can't even see what I'm doing. Let me open up Sublime. I think it's because of the way it's validating. No, not now. I think it's because of the way it's validating that on the server side. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to say, oh, what is this with the note at the end? Because it was missing an and. Okay, let's try it again. There we go. All right. Check the logs. Might take a little while. You can see here on the server side. Oh, bot visit failed. Uh-oh. Let me try it again. Okay, bear with me. My payloads are all over the place. So we've got a question mark, and then we've got an and right after it for some reason. We don't want that. So we want the name. We want that to go to contact. And then I think this might need URL encoding still. I know it works in my browser window, but we might need to try it in a second. Let's have a go. Let's just do this first of all. All right, so no. Oh, what happened? Oh, it's HTTPS now. That's why it's not working. Okay, let me see. Did that work locally? Yep, I got the cookie again. Okay, I'm going to send that to the admin. Reported successfully. There we go. All right, we got the flag. Okay, let me wrap it up here. Any questions, comments? Leave them down below. Thanks.